Okay. Hello. This is Miss Carla again, and we're going to keep reading Love, Sugar, Magic, A Dash of Trouble by Anna Mariano. Again, this is a Rhode Island Latino Books Month Award nominee for 2020 in 3rd through 5th grade level. But remember, even if you're in a grade higher than 5th or lower than 3rd, if you enjoy this book and you want this to be a book that you read, you can read in this grade level. And you just have to read 3 books or more in the grade level, in the same grade level, and then you'll be able to vote in May. And I'll talk more about that next time, about how you'll vote and what the other options are. But if you go to the website for Rhode Island Latino Books Month, you'll see all the nominees. We are on page 161. We have read 160 pages so far. Look at all that. And we're on chapter 15, which is called Friends and Family. There's that little skull that kind of looks like Day of the Dead skull, but we'll see what that refers to. After some debate, Leo and Caroline decided to leave 3 cookies in Brent's locker. They didn't want to risk him sharing with anyone, but they were afraid that one tiny cookie wouldn't be enough. Leo wrapped up the cookies using the clear plastic bags and golden twist ties that Mama kept at home, even though they were really for bakery products. Caroline wrote a mysterious note, "Hope you have a sweet day," in curly cursive that didn't look anything like her normal handwriting. The rest of the cookies Leo hid in a big Ziploc bag under her bed until she could ask Alma and Belen's advice on what to do with them. She didn't want to toss them. Mama hated wasted food, but she wasn't sure they were safe to leave lying around. If Alma and Belen didn't know, maybe Abuela would. At lunch on Wednesday, Caroline asked for permission to go to the library to check out a book for a made-up project. Leo ripped crumbs off the fresh, fluffy bread of her sandwich, barely able to sit still, knowing that Caroline was sneaking down the 6th grade hall to tape the cookies to Brent's locker door. Leo tapped her foot under the long gray lunch table and shifted on the attached plastic stool. What would happen if Caroline got caught? What was taking so long? "Is everything okay?" Leo jumped. Mai Wen frowned at her, head tilted, like Senor Gato when he caught Leo staring at him. "Oh, yeah, everything's fine," Leo said after a pause. "Where's Caroline?" Tricia tilted her head at the empty seat beside Leo. Leo had planned to say, "at the library," but she didn't have to because at that moment Caroline pulled open a cafeteria door and flashed Leo a thumbs up from behind Tricia's and Mai's back. "She's right there." The girls turned and Leo sighed and dropped her handful of crumbs so that she could take her first real bite out of her ham sandwich. Caroline grinned as she sat down and pulled her lunch bag out of her backpack. "Mission accomplished," she whispered to Leo. "Oh, good." Tricia flashed a smile at Caroline. "We were afraid you were going to miss lunch because of those gross boys again." Mai nodded. "We wanted to tell you that we think what they did was horrible. Boys are jerks." "Oh," Caroline blushed, deep red. "Thanks." She shifted on her cafeteria stool. "We also wanted to say, welcome back." Mai smiled. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay. I'm good. I've been hanging out with Leo. She's teaching me how to bake." "Wow." Tricia took a big bite out of her tuna sandwich and scattered crumbs as she talked. "That is so cool. Leo's family makes the best bread in the whole state, probably. You must be an expert baker, right, Leo?" Leo ducked her head and smiled into her lunchbox. She didn't know Tricia was so into the bakery. Leo liked Mai and Tricia, but she never knew what to say to them. The 2 girls had been best friends with each other all through elementary school, and they fit together like matching salt and pepper shakers. "I always get my birthday cake from your bakery," Mai added. "I saw you working at the Day of the Dead festival, but you were talking to your sister and you didn't see me." Mai stopped and looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry," Leo said. "I would have said hi if I'd seen you. I guess I was just a little distracted," Mai said. "We know." She and Tricia shared a smile. You're always in your own world, Tricia said with a nod. Yeah, but Leo's world is way cooler, Caroline said. I want to hang out there, Tricia said. You should let us in sometime. Mai smiled at Leo. Leo dropped her head. She had always thought that she had problems making friends because it was such a difficult thing to do. She had never considered that there might be friends to be had if she had just looked a little harder. I want to learn some baking too, Tricia said. It sounds awesome. It is awesome. Caroline raised her head a little and smiled. Actually, we were talking about doing a thing where, her eyes flicked to Leo, where we all take turns making cookies and bringing them for everyone to eat, like a club, a snack club. If you two would be, I don't know, interested in that? Tricia and Mai were in love with the idea of a snack club, and their excited questions attracted the attention of other sixth graders sitting near them. Soon Leo had promised to bring cookies for everyone at the table 1 week from Friday, and Mai had offered to bring in muffins for the Friday after that. Leo had never been the center of so much attention. Her cheeks flushed as she made up the answers to questions about the club. How many servings did you have to bring? Did everything have to be homemade? Would eighth graders be allowed in, or boys? Leo felt a little nervous about all the talking and laughing until she caught Caroline's eye and saw her friend looking a little overwhelmed too. Leo laughed, and Caroline laughed, and soon the whole table was laughing. Leo half wondered if she had cast some sort of accidental breadcrumb spell for popularity, but she knew that there was a different kind of magic happening at the table. All year, Leo had felt shy and left out, but with Caroline back at her side, talking felt simple. Maybe having one friend made it easier to make more. I have to tell you what happened, Caroline said when she and Leo had a minute alone in the courtyard. I was walking past Brent's locker, ready to leave the cookies, when I saw Brent walking straight toward me. I got so scared I hid behind the water fountain. Brent should have seen me, but he didn't, and he still didn't see me when I peeked over the top of the water fountain a minute later. He grabbed a few things out of his locker, but then he just stopped moving and stared at the locker for a long time, and then he closed the door and walked away without even locking it. He looked like a zombie or something, and his face was all pale. Weird, Leo said. Do you know why? No, Caroline shrugged and frowned. But he left the locker open, so I put the cookies right inside and locked them up. I was so lucky. Leo nodded as the bell rang, and crowds in the courtyard surged into the hallway. The plan had worked even more perfectly than they had imagined. She did feel lucky. Of course, as soon as Leo thought this, the plan's luck ran out. Brent's seat, when she returned to Miss Wood's classroom to start science, was mysteriously empty, and some of the boys around Leo whispered that Brent had thrown up in the locker room after gym and had gone home. Leo's throat turned dry as she tried to hear more of the whispers. Had Brent found the cookies before he left? With no way to know, Leo chewed on her lip and tapped her fingers on her desk. From Caroline's nervous face in the front of the room, Leo guessed that her friend had heard the same rumor and was wondering the same thing. The two girls sat quietly through the bus ride that afternoon, Leo tapping her fingers and Caroline tugging her braid and twisting her bracelet. Leo opened her mouth at least 5 times to say something, but every time she stayed silent, worried that someone would overhear her if she mentioned Brent, magic, or cookies. At home, Leo stomped around restlessly until she scared Senor Gato out of the living room. She moved to the kitchen and paced, counting and recounting the steps between the table and the refrigerator. Everything okay, Leo? Daddy interrupted her path to get orange juice out of the fridge. How did your cookies go over? Leo startled before she remembered the snack club lie. At least she had real news to share now instead of having to make up more lies. It was great. I think a lot of people are interested. As soon as Daddy left the kitchen, Leo resumed her pacing. Hey, little Leo. Isabel snuck 2 ginger snaps out of the cookie jar and ate them standing over the counter. What are you up to? Leo stopped pacing, but continued tapping her fingers against her shorts and tapping her toes on the floor. Oh, nothing. I'm just... Isabel chomped into her second cookie and smiled, ready to listen. Leo could tell Isabel what was going on. Alma and Belen already knew. Isabel wouldn't get mad. Probably. Unless she did get mad. Unless she thought Leo shouldn't be telling family secrets. Isabel, she said, Have you ever She couldn't risk telling Isabel everything, but she wanted her sister's reassurance. What do you do when you're worried? Isabel sat across the table from Leo, bringing the cookie jar and setting it between them. That depends, she said. What are you worried about? Nothing? Nothing really. It doesn't even matter. Well, Isabel leaned forward on her elbows. If I don't know what I'm worried about, sometimes it helps to talk about it. Leo shook her head. Leo wanted to see the results of her spell, and not even Isabel's encouragement could scratch her impatient itch. Either the spell would work or it wouldn't, and until she knew, Leo couldn't stop being excited and nervous and guilty and proud. Never mind, there's nothing I can do about it anyway. In that case, Isabel sat up straight, pulled her hair away from her face, and closed her eyes. You should probably relax. Leo's heart stopped pounding, and the butterflies in her stomach folded their wings. A dizzy fizzling in her brain almost distracted her from the spicy scent that wasn't coming from the ginger snaps. That's magic! She grabbed the table to steady herself. You're using magic on me. This was Isabel's power of influence, changing Leo's feelings. Yes, sorry, I thought it might help. Do you mind? Leo shrugged as the fuzziness faded. She couldn't be mad at Isabel for trying to help. I guess not. It tickles, though. Isabel smiled. Sometimes I just do it without thinking about it. You take it better than Marisol, and she needs calming more than anyone. Leo looked over her shoulder. The kitchen was empty. Why doesn't Marisol like magic? Isabel reached for another cookie, took a bite, chewed. Marisol, don't tell her I said this, okay? I think she does like magic. I think she likes it, but it scares her, so she pretends not to like it. Why does it scare her? Oh, you know. Isabel picked crumbs off the table with her fingertip. Marisol is scared of everything. This didn't sound like the Marisol Leo knew. Marisol wasn't afraid of spiders or cockroaches or strangers or boys. Leo didn't know anyone so fearless. But there isn't anything to be scared of, right? Magic isn't dangerous. Leo didn't want to involve Caroline in something risky. She didn't even want anything bad to happen to Brent. Not really. Well, sometimes a spell can backfire, Isabel said, staring down at her hands. I guess there is some risk involved, just like with anything. Using the big ovens can be dangerous, but we practice and train, so we know how to handle them safely, just like our powers. Don't worry, Leo, you'll always have your family supporting you. Isabel probably wasn't trying to make Leo feel guilty, but her words only made Leo cringe. Right, she muttered. So it's true that magic experiments can go horribly wrong? Oh, Marisol said something to you, didn't she? Some dire prediction of doom? Of course, I could smack her. She shouldn't be putting fears into your head just because she's afraid to do any spells. Leo wasn't trying to make her sisters fight. They did enough of that on their own. No, magic can be amazing too, right? Isabel beamed. It always is. Leo, you're part of the family. You're a bruja. You don't need to be afraid of magic. It's part of you. Leo nodded, but even with Isabel's calming magic, she still felt anxious. She had never thought her magic would hurt her. It was her friends she was worried about. Chapter 16 is called Patience. When Brent didn't show up to school on Thursday, Leo thought she might scream. She and Caroline stared at Brent's locker, but since Leo's magic did not seem to include X-ray vision, there was no way to tell if the locker had been opened or if the cookies were still there. At lunch, Leo found herself surrounded by classmates who had questions about the snack club. Most people needed help figuring out what to bring in, but some had baking questions too. What does it mean when the recipe says to separate the egg? Mary Gretel asked. Is that the same as cracking it? My mom won't let me use the oven, Lara Sanchez said. How long do you microwave cookie dough? Greg Lewis ran over to the table to ask Leo, first, if boys were allowed into the snack club, and second, what TSP and TBSP stood for in a recipe. Leo thought that everyone in the world knew the abbreviations for teaspoon and tablespoon. But she quickly discovered that lots of the things she thought of as basic knowledge made her a sixth grade baking expert. Leo is an egg-cracking machine, Caroline bragged, and her kitchen has 100 kinds of flour and every spice you've ever heard of. The other sixth graders crowded closer with more questions, and Leo didn't know what to do with them all. The noise and excitement overwhelmed her until the bell finally rang and she could retreat back to her desk in Miss Wood's classroom. I can't believe Snack Club is going to be a real thing, she told Caroline on the bus ride home, staring up the aisle at the profiles of kids who were turning to smile at her. Nobody was ever interested in baking before now. I'm sure they were interested. Who doesn't love cookies? Nobody ever talked to me about it, Leo thought. But then she had never really talked to her classmates about baking either. The phone rang later that evening when Leo sat on the floor of the living room doing her homework. Leo, Mama called out, it's for you. Her and Daddy's hands were full, stretching out the crust of the pizza they were making for dinner. Hello? She rubbed the bumpy impressions the carpet had left on her elbow as she held the phone to her ear. Caroline? It worked! What? Caroline's voice was high and thin, but Leo wasn't sure if that was excitement or phone static. Brent ate the cookies! Leo glanced at Isabel, who stood a few feet away, smiling her, "Isn't the baby growing up so fast?" smile. Very slowly, making sure to keep her face casually blank, Leo paced away from her sister and toward the hall. Mm-hmm. She made extra sure not to sound interested. Did you hear me? He ate them. I saw it through the kitchen window. Really? Leo whispered while racing down the hall. Leo, are you even listening? Leo made it to the safety of her room and slammed the door behind her. She jumped onto her bed and kicked her feet in the air in silent triumph. Sorry, she whispered. My sister was right there. Are you sure? How did you see? Tell me everything. I was cleaning the kitchen because I wanted to try baking in my house, And Dad said that he wants to learn with me, as long as we make sure not to set anything on fire. That's great. I can help you both. Yes, please. So I was standing by the window, and you know how I can see Brent's kitchen from there. He opened his backpack and took out his math book, and the cookies fell out with the book, and he looked at them, and then he showed them to his mom, and then he ate them. He actually ate them. Leo leaned back on the bed and pressed the phone against her ear, grinning hugely. What did his mom say? I couldn't hear her, Caroline reminded Leo. She laughed, I think. How long until the spell kicks in? Leo hadn't thought about that. When did he eat the cookies? About 2 minutes ago? Leo had no idea how long a spell like this took to work, but she didn't want to tell Caroline that. Well, the recipe said 1 bite, so it probably won't take too long. Probably you'll hear from him in an hour, since you live so close. You really think so? Caroline's voice jumped even higher. It's going to work? Definitely. Leo traced the stitching on her comforter and wondered if she believed herself. By tomorrow morning, at the very latest, Brent will be begging you to be friends again. Those are 2 quick chapters. Now we're on to chapter 17, called Love Letters. Ooh. But if Brent had made up with Caroline, there was no sign of it on her face as she got on the bus the next morning. Leo watched her friend walk alone down the aisle and slink into the bus seat. Nothing? Leo asked. Nothing, Caroline sighed, chewing on her thumbnail. And he didn't come to the bus stop today. Maybe he's sick again? Leo felt her stomach flip over itself. Her cookies couldn't make anyone sick, could they? I don't know. Caroline moved on to bite the nail of her index finger. It's okay, Leo said as firmly as she could. Everything's just fine. Maybe he had a doctor's appointment or had to go to school early. Don't worry about it. Caroline nodded, but continued chewing her nails. The main hall of Rose Hill Middle School was noisiest the 5 minutes before homeroom started. Leo dodged between a group of slow-moving 8th graders and grabbed her locker like a drowning animal clinging to a branch to keep from being pulled downstream. Leo's locker was number 15A, the same bright red as all the lockers in the hall, with gray, white, and black paint showing underneath the scratches. Leo spun the combination lock, pulled the door toward her, and reached for the math book she would need for the beginning of the day. She didn't expect anything to fall out of her locker, but something did. She didn't expect the thing that fell to be an unfamiliar square of bright pink construction paper, but it was. And she definitely didn't expect what was written on the paper in wobbly script with the R's erased and rewritten. Dearest Leo, always quiet, always cool, always on your own at school. Lots of sisters, lots of cake. How I hope someday you'll bake something wonderful for me. I don't even care if it's gluten-free. Please be mine. XOXOXOXO. Brent. There's the note. Leo read the note 3 times over, and then she dropped it on the floor and stomped on it, and then, slowly, she bent down and picked it up to read a 4th time. Her stomach churned, and her face felt hot enough to broil. Dearest? XOXOXOXO? The Love Bite cookies lived up to their name and more. Brent was totally in love. But with Leo? That wasn't right. He was supposed to make up with Caroline. If he fell in love with anyone, it should have been her. Leo double-checked the note, but it was still her name on top. Had she accidentally put her eyelash into the dough? Did Brent automatically fall in love with the Bruja who cast the spell? Or Leo buried her face in the locker. Had the spell not worked right? I have to tell you something. Leo grabbed Caroline's arm before she could sit in her regular seat at the front of the room. There was still a minute, maybe a minute and a half, until the tardy bell rang, so Leo tugged Caroline, backpack and all, out into the hallway. I'm so sorry, Caroline. I don't know how it happened, but look! Caroline's eyes bulged wide and the corner of her mouth quirked up into a worried smile. Leo, I think the spell worked a little differently than we expected. In her hands, she held a square of bright construction paper, with shaky, cursive writing covering it. Leo's mouth fell open. Tricia and Mai rushed into class but stopped when they saw Caroline and her note. Oh, Mai said, you got one too? I heard he got his mom to drive him to school early just to give them all out, Tricia sighed. Is this what it's like to become a teenager? Both she and Mai held their own pink squares, and Leo drew hers out of her pocket, and Caroline's smile flickered and died as she looked at the 4 identical-looking love letters from Brent Bayman. Dearest Caroline, I love your smile, I love your hair, I'd love to see you anywhere. I love your brain, I love your house. You're as cute as a tiny mouse. Please, oh please, say you'll be mine. I can't even wait for Valentine's. Love, Brent. Dearest Tricia, you're as pretty as a deer, and I think you're really cool. So I hope you won't think I'm weird if I ask you to go out after school. Please say yes, I'll be so glad. We can eat some ice cream, maybe. I'll be really, really sad if you say you won't be my baby. Love, Brent. Dearest Mai, Japanese haikus are pretty and I like them, just like I like you. Love, Brent. I'm Vietnamese, Mai wailed, crumpling the note with a scowl after Leo had read it. Is this some kind of joke? Leo looked down, suddenly feeling like the world's smallest cucaracha. She wanted to crumple her paper, too. Brent hadn't even bothered coming up with different rhymes, reusing cool and school in both her poem and Tricia's. The love letter was the opposite of special, and Leo felt silly about the tiniest second when she had felt special, thinking that Brent had written it just for her. And if that hurt her, she couldn't imagine how Caroline must feel. I don't know if it's a joke or what, Leo lied, but obviously he doesn't really mean all of them. Let's just ignore it. Tricia and Mai nodded, and Caroline joined them a few seconds later. Leo thought she saw something sparkling in Caroline's eyes, but it was hard to tell when her friend ducked behind her hair. Come on, Leo took Caroline's arm. Let's get to class. On the way to her desk, Leo saw pink construction paper squares on desks, peeking out of backpacks, and several folded up and dropped in the recycling bin. It seemed like most of the girls in the class had gotten one, and a bunch of the boys, too. And there, Sitting at his desk in the center of the room, his eyes flickering from seat to seat and a dopey grin stretching his face into a dazed expression, was Brent. He met Leo's glare and beamed at her. "Good morning, Leo. You're looking lovely today." And he gave her a terrible, horrible, mushy, gushy wink. Leo pressed her hand to her mouth and swallowed hard to keep her cinnamon toast crunch in her stomach where it belonged. She needed to do some magical damage control fast. Let's see. All right, the next chapter is also short, so I think I'll read that, and then we'll be done for today. This is chapter 18, and it's called Romance. Caroline did not show up in the cafeteria at lunchtime. "Is she okay?" Mai lowered her voice so the rest of the table couldn't hear. The sixth graders buzzed about the love letters, whispering and giggling and shooting angry or confused or flirtatious looks at each other. "I don't know what's the matter with Brent, but, well, it did sort of seem like maybe Caroline might have liked him." Tricia nodded and leaned across the table to listen. Leo opened her mouth, then shut it again. She had suspected the same thing, but she didn't want to add to the rumors, especially when nobody else knew the real magical cause of all the commotion. Besides, Caroline had only said she wanted to be friends with Brent again. "I think the note surprised her." Leo shrugged. "She didn't know that everyone got one at first. I didn't either, actually, so that made it extra confusing." Tricia and Mai nodded, pursing their lips in sympathy. "We met at our lockers, so we found them at the same time," Tricia said. "What do you think everyone's going to do?" Leo looked over at Brent, who sat at the very end of his usual table all by himself, wearing a dreamy smile and pausing from slurping his instant noodles to scribble something in his open notebook. "More love letters?" Leo's stomach churned. "I don't know," she started to say, but the question was abruptly answered when Emily Eccles threw down her uneaten granola bar, stood up, and stalked across the cafeteria to the far end of the boys' table. "Hi, Brent." Her voice carried in the echoey room, especially since every other middle schooler, even the eighth graders, had gone silent. Mr. Kuo, the lunch monitor for the day, looked up. "Emily!" Brent jumped to his feet and threw his arms wide. "Emily Eccles with the beautiful freckles! What brings you here on this fine day?" Emily's eyes popped like a squeezed bullfrog. Leo was sure that her own face looked just the same. Brent sounded like his brain had been replaced by an alien's. "I just wanted to ask you," she said, taking a step back from Brent's open arms, but quickly recovering her smile, "if you wanted to see a movie with me this weekend." She settled into a flirty lean against the table. "Since you like my freckles so much." Leo's table erupted in whispers. What was Emily doing? What would Brent say? Were there even any good movies playing this week? Leo wished they would all hush. She had to see what the spell made Brent say next. "Nothing would make me happier than to spend an evening by your side." Brent reached out to grab hold of Emily's hand. Leo's table gasped. Brent's friends, who had been trying very hard to pretend they weren't watching, gasped. The seventh and eighth graders snickered. Mr. Kuo put down his coffee and pushed his chair back, hovering hesitantly as he watched the scene play out. Emily turned straight to her friends at Leo's table and shot them a satisfied smirk. "So you like me?" she asked Brent. "You want to be my boyfriend?" Leo held her breath with the rest of the cafeteria, suddenly very glad that Caroline had not come to lunch. "Of course!" Brent cried, pulling Emily's hand to his heart. "I love you more than anything in the world, Emily Eccles." He sounded like a knight from a romance movie. Leo shrank in her seat, sure that someone would suspect supernatural interference any minute. Emily freed her hand and sat in the space next to the one Brent had left. He quickly reclaimed his seat and her hand, and then started writing in his notebook again. The other boys at the table pretended to vomit. Mr. Kuo sat all the way back down, a smile on his face. Whispers flew like spinning knives from Emily's friends. "What are you writing?" Emily asked Brent, her voice still loud, not ready to let the cafeteria return to normal just yet. She had found her spotlight, and she wasn't going to give it up until she had to. Oh, do you want to see? It's a love poem for Maria Villarreal. What? Emily snatched her hand away. Leo buried her face in her hands, but she could still hear the whispers repeating Maria's name over and over. Why are you writing a poem for her? Because I love her, Brent said cheerfully. Leo didn't need to look up to imagine the bright red of Emily's cheeks or the bounce of her curls as she tossed her head angrily, but she looked anyway, peeking through her fingers like it was a horror movie. You can't love Maria! Emily stood up again. The entire cafeteria was murmuring. Mr. Quo stood up all the way this time, but Emily and Brent didn't seem to notice. But I do love her. Brent's face was still plastered with a dreamy smile. More than anything in the world. Emily stamped her foot. You can't love us both more than anything in the world. You have to make up your mind. Make up my mind? How? I love everyone in the world more than anything in the world. Brent flung his arms wide and beamed around the cafeteria. Shocked whispers and snickers erupted from every table. Mr. Quo started to stomp his way over to the bickering couple. You are a liar, Brent Bayman, and I hate you. We are breaking up. It was then that Mr. Quo politely suggested that both she and Brent might want to go chat with Vice Principal Torres about the commotion. Brent gazed fondly at the cafeteria monitor, smiling and nodding as he talked. After they left, the conversation in the cafeteria grew to a roar. Maria talked loudly at anyone who would listen, explaining that she was not interested in Brent. Following her lead, Maria's friends rushed to proclaim that Brent was not even that cute anyway and annoying to boot. Leo's stomach crawled with the horrible feeling that had been building since she had first seen the 4 love letters. Something was horribly wrong with the cookies. Brent had gone totally lovesick, and it was all Leo's fault. She swallowed and coughed to clear the nervous lump in her throat and looked at Trisha and Mai. Can we all agree not to tell Caroline about this? She asked. The 2 girls nodded. Leo didn't find Caroline until class started again, and by then Miss Wood had heard about the lunchtime theatrics and decided on silent reading and worksheet time to keep everyone calm for the rest of the day. Leo spent the time not doing her language arts, but trying to formulate a plan that would fix Brent. She had made this mess, so she had to clean it up. Besides, she couldn't leave Brent the way he was. The 6th grade would tear him to pieces by the end of the week. Why wasn't there a spell reversal spell? Leo flipped through the pages of the recipe book for the 3rd time, but it was no use. She had already searched through all the recipes she could read on her own, and none of them was the slightest bit of use for stopping a magically romantic serial poet. She needed Caroline to help her read the rest of the recipes and make sense of what each spell could do, if Caroline would even talk to Leo after the mess she'd made of everything. Leo tried to catch Caroline's eye for the rest of the day, but her friend kept her head buried in a book with a medieval castle on the cover, silently reading, or at least pretending to. When Leo got on the bus that afternoon, she didn't quite believe she still had a seat buddy until Caroline actually sat down. Hi, Leo swallowed 3 times, her throat suddenly dry. Are you it's just a messed up spell, right? I know. Caroline didn't meet Leo's eyes. I just don't understand what happened. For a second I thought maybe he liked me, and that was weird enough, but now I'm just confused. I think, Leo gulped again. I think I maybe messed things up. Please don't be mad, but I think it was my fault. I think my idea worked out all wrong. Your idea? Caroline met Leo's eyes, and then she gasped. The blank part of the spell, not making him like me, it made him like everyone. I'm so sorry, Caroline. I ruined everything. Poor Brent, Caroline whispered. Emily Eccles is going to socially destroy him. Leo cringed. Even though her classmates couldn't talk about anything else, she had still hoped that Caroline didn't know about the lunchtime fiasco. So what are we going to do about it? The bus turned onto Caroline Street. and Leo made a quick decision. You're going to let me use your phone to tell my dad that I missed the bus and walk to your house, and I need a ride home. And while we're waiting, we're going to find a way to make this right. Daddy was not happy with Leo after her phone call. He was busy filling out important paperwork for the bakery and couldn't pick her up for at least an hour, which was even more time than Leo had been counting on. She said hello to Caroline's dad, listened to Caroline's lie about a history project, and then followed Caroline down the hall into the pink and yellow butterfly room. I couldn't find a reversal spell, but maybe I missed it. I don't know the word for reverse in Spanish. I'll look. Caroline waited for Leo to pull out the recipe book and then started flipping the pages quickly and silently, chewing on her thumbnail. Leo watched for a few minutes, then turned away, feeling useless. She scanned the bookshelf next to Caroline's bed, finding a few books she recognized and many more she didn't. Maybe Caroline would reopen her lending library, if they were still best friends after this, that is. Leo's shoulders slumped. Friends were different from sisters, because no matter how angry you made your sisters, they would always be your sisters. I just don't see anything that reverses a spell. Caroline flipped quickly through the last few pages of the recipe book. There are no my mistake meltaways or oops-a-daisy pies. There's not even a forgetfulness flan. There are about 17 different love spells in here, but not one spell to get rid of them. She slammed the book closed, blowing hair out of her face in annoyance. What are we going to do, Leo? We can't just leave him like this. Leo gulped. Maybe the spell will wear off on its own. Her voice wasn't confident enough to fool anyone, even herself. Caroline bit her thumbnail and tapped her foot against the floor. We should tell your mom. What? Leo pulled the spellbook toward her chest. No, I can't. Isabel, then, Caroline offered. We need help. I can't tell them. I'm not even supposed to be doing magic, and I don't need them. I can figure this out. Caroline stayed quiet, but the way she frowned showed she wasn't convinced. Leo hugged the spellbook to her chest, as if she could squeeze a solution out of it. Caroline didn't understand. If Leo ran to Mama or Isabel now, it would mean she really was a baby, like they all thought. She stared hard at one of the paintings Caroline's dad had made, a purple flower smiling in the middle of a dark gray rainstorm. If we can't reverse the spell, she said, thinking as she talked, maybe we can cover it up somehow. She thought about how the thick purple spread on top of the gray paint, hiding the original color. Could spells work the same way? How many love spells did you say were in the book? I was exaggerating, Caroline admitted, but there are at least 7. Why? Because I have another idea. Leo bit her lip and put the spellbook back on the bed. I'm not really sure if it will work, but I think it's at least worth a try. Caroline hesitated. And it involves more magic? I think another spell is the only way to stop this one, Leo shrugged. And we have to try something. She could have pretended to be more confident, but she was tired of trying to fool Caroline, especially now that Caroline already knew that Leo wasn't the world's most perfect witch. What do you think? Caroline looked from Leo to the book. What are the chances that your plan will make everything worse? I have no idea, Leo answered honestly. Caroline's nervous frown curled into a nervous smile. Well, at least let me hear it then. Leo tried not to look too happy when Daddy knocked on the door, but it was hard to keep the skip out of her step as she followed him to their pickup. In her backpack was a sheet of notebook paper with a translated recipe for a love potion that was simple and sweet, just the thing to help Brent focus and stop his wide-spreading love fever. While Daddy lectured Leo about the inconveniences she had caused and reminded her that taking the bus home was her responsibility as part of the family, Leo just stared out the window, working out her plan to save the day. Daddy noticed that his scolding wasn't making an impact because he sighed and turned on the radio, and Leo watched Rose Hill fly by to the twangy voices of country singers and their equally twangy guitars. They didn't need to sound so depressed, Leo thought. If it was heartbreak they were singing about, she could have helped them out. This love thing might have some ups and downs, but she was pretty sure it always turned out right in the end. that is the end of that chapter. And the next chapter that we'll start next time is chapter 19, called Spiderwebs. Ooh, and it looks like it has a recipe right at the beginning. All right, have a good day, and I will see you guys tomorrow at 3:30, remember, which is just in 50 minutes. I will be doing a story time for kindergartners through second graders, but everyone is welcome, and we're going to do a little activity with that too. So see you then.